morning, everybody. How are you? Now, see, that time he's so good. That's all right. That's good. I just need to get you warmed up. I know those steps. Turn with me your Bibles to John chapter 10. You probably know all about this chapter. This is the I am the Good Shepherd chapter. And as we make our way through the book of John, this, we're familiar with I am the Good Shepherd and all that in this chapter, but we have to be familiar with the whole chapter. This passage we're going to look at today, we're going to look at verses 1 through 21, can be a little puzzling if we just simply read through the passage. But I'm going to give you a few key words to look for, and then I'm going to kind of set the whole thing up before we start, so it kind of makes sense to you in a moment. As we read 1 through 21 in a few moments, a few at a time, it'll speak of sheep, of course. It'll speak of a shepherd. It'll speak of a door and a doorkeeper and a flock and a fold and another fold and a thief and a robber and a hired hand and an owner of a sheep, as well as some other things. But all of those have their own kind of detail, and so we need to get into all that detail. But I just want you to kind of be looking for those key words when we go through this. Some of it is analogy, and some of it is very literal. But I'm going to try to attempt anyway to sort it all out, because there's a great message here for all of us. We, of course, are considered the sheep. Okay? Of course, our great shepherd is the Lord Jesus Christ. And so, when you think about these sheep, we ought to think about ourselves in these cases today. This passage actually represents a transition. Israel at this time was like a sheepfold. That sheepfold had separated them from the Gentile world, which was the rest of the world. And now the long-awaited Messiah has come into their presence. He introduces himself as the Good Shepherd, and then he introduces a new sheepfold. Now, the first thing we need to know about this chapter, this passage, is that it is a continuation. And I told you before, there were no chapter breaks or verse breaks in the original scripture. And this is a continuation of the previous chapter where we read and studied about the man born blind to whom Jesus gave his sight. So this continues into that theme. Jesus is still talking to the same group of people, the Pharisees and some other folks that were hanging around listening as well. So Jesus, by his grace and his mercy, really is going to take another shot at helping this group of people to come to the truth that the blind man had experienced. Now remember, the Pharisees had just kicked him out of that sheepfold, out of the synagogue sheepfold. And Jesus had come to take him in, to receive him into revealing really a new sheepfold that Jesus had come to begin. The word fold, we're not really familiar with that because we're not really familiar. You all see people who have been grew up for sheep. Okay, well, you guys correct me probably on some things. I'll do the best I can. But a fold, let me just talk about a fold for a moment because you'll see that word over later. A fold was really kind of like an enclosure, and it helped the shepherd to keep his sheep safe, especially at night when it was time to gather them in from out on the hillsides and graze and so forth. Some commentators, and it does appear to be the case in this passage where it's broken up in two pieces, some commentators believe that there were two kinds of folds. There was a village fold and a countryside fold. And so we'll look at that a little bit as we go. But let's just look at verse 1. John 10, verse 1. Truly, truly. All right, let's just stop right there. He begins with that phrase that he often used, truly, truly, when he was trying to say, look, in a special way, now everything Jesus says is important. Everything in the Bible is important. But there are certain times when Jesus just tells us to say, like, listen up, I really need you to know this. I really need you to understand what I'm about to say. And this is one of those places. Now, in fact, there's two of them in this passage, which is a little unusual. So, reading on, he says, truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter by the door into the fold of the sheep, but climbs up some other way, he is a thief and a robber. All right, so the thief would come in some way other than by the door. He would sneak in, he would break in, because he wasn't a sheep. He wasn't led into the fold by the shepherd. He would come in a different way. Here's what you need to know about all this. Jesus came in by the front door into Judaism. When he came by the front door. He didn't sneak in. He's the real deal. Matter of fact, some 300 Old Testament prophecies told of how Jesus was going to come. He was going to do this and a lot of other things. And he has fulfilled most of those prophecies already. A few of them are still yet future. And we have total faith that he will fulfill those as well. If you look in your bulletin, you see a few verses. I got them out of order because I was still working on this after Teresa was finished this week. So I just sent her verses and put them in there, and I'll figure them out as I go. So the second verse you see there is Galatians 4:4. It says, but when the fullness of time came, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law. And so this is part of that time that God said it's time to go down there and begin to do all the things we've been studying about in the book of John. Now, it says a thief and a robber. We tend to look at that as kind of the same thing in our day. But in the original language, a thief and a robber was two different things. If you think about it, it's kind of the same way today, really. A thief is one who steals by deception. He's like a wolf in sheep's clothing. I think of the cults today. The cults that try to come into the real faith, the real church, and steal some of the members. And they're successful at that something. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Also thinking in our modern day, I think about the phone scammers that we all get every day. Email scammers, just wanting you to fix something on this account by clicking a button and then you messed up good. They're coming in a very deceptive way. A robber, on the other hand, was one who would steal by violence and intimidation. He didn't come like a friend. He came like the wolf. I read something the other day that might be interesting to you because we all do this. We go to parking lots, right? And because when you go to a parking lot, obviously you're going to a place that has something to sell you. The implication is you've got money on you, or at least a credit card or something on you. I read that 7% of all violent crime in our nation takes place in parking lots. So that's something to think about. Before you get out of your car, take a look around. See if what's going on there, because a lot of crime happens in parking lots, and it's usually a violent crime, where someone is wanting to steal something from you. Let's read on. Let's read the next 4 verses, verse 2 to 5. But he who enters by the door is a shepherd of the sheep. To him the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name, and leads them out. When he puts forth all of his own, in other words, when he gets them out of the fold, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. A stranger they simply will not follow, but will flee from him because they do not know the voice of strangers. Now, some commentators believe, some papers are more common than others, but the commentators, some of them believe that this particular fold happened in the village, a village fold. Here's what would happen. Several shepherds might put their flocks into a communal fold. all the sheep in the same one. It would be a fenced-in area. It would have a gate, and then the watchkeeper, known in this passage as the doorkeeper. He would, while the shepherds would either go home if they lived in that area or somewhere comfortable to sleep, the shepherds didn't get a lot of sleep out in the field because they're watching over the sheep. So occasionally they would bring them into town, and they would put them in a communal fold, and they would go get a good night's sleep. But before the sheep could enter into a communal fold, they had to pass under a rod. A guy would stand there with a rod, and when the sheep comes up, he would lower the rod, stop the sheep, and check him out. Make sure that he didn't have, serious blemishes, make sure there was no disease going on, that he had anything that of course, would transmit to the whole flock, all the flock. And if he passed, he would raise the rod, and he would go on in. There was a phrase in that day called passing under the rod. It's simply a metaphor for a sheep inspection. So that's what they would do in the communal fold. And then after a good night's sleep, the shepherd will return the next day to the communal fold, and the doorkeeper would open up the gate and let the sheep out. Now, in that day, there was no branding of the animals like we think of our Old West and present West, even where they brand the cattle and so forth to know that they're there. He would just open up the door, and the way that they would determine where the sheep that were his would be by the shepherd's call. Each shepherd had a very distinct call, and only his sheep would move past all the other sheep in that communal fold to follow him because they knew the voice of their shepherd. Very important theme in this whole passage. Now, how many of you are dog owners? Y'all got dogs? You got dogs? Okay, good. Just think y'all normal for a minute. Okay. If you got a dog, he probably does the same thing, right? He knows your voice. He listens to your commands. He's different because somebody said, my dog don't listen to mine. Yeah, that's a different dog. But normally, they'll listen to your voice, your particular voice. I know mine does that. Maybe even your cat does. Well, probably not. You don't want to listen? Okay. I'm not a cat. I don't know anything about cat. I've heard a story about an Australian shepherd who had been charged with stealing sheep. And he claimed that these sheep were all his. Well, of course, he ends up in court. The judge and the jury heard all the arguments, but they just couldn't figure it out. None of those arguments seemed real viable. They were still puzzled. So the judge decides he's going to call his own witness, the final witness. So guess who he calls in? The sheep. He calls in the sheep. There's a whole flock of sheep in that he supposedly was accused of stealing. And then he told the accuser, the plaintiff, he said, I want you to go out into the hallway and call these sheep. So he did, and the sheep all hunkered down in the courtroom, like they were afraid in New England. So then he tells the defendant, the guy that's been accused of stealing, you go out in the hall and call the sheep. And when he did, every sheep in there jumped up and ran up the aisle to the shepherd. And the judge pounded his gavel and declared the case closed. He said, this man is not a thief. Sheep always know the shepherd's voice. And again, that's how it's done. I want you to notice, as we read through here in verse 4, it says, when he puts forth all his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. There's two phrases. He goes ahead of them, and they follow him. If you were to go out and watch people on our end of the world, western side of the world, western sheep shepherds, they drive their sheep, usually with dogs. They get behind them, and maybe the dogs go around, but they get behind them and drive them, kind of like we do cattle. But eastern shepherds, the Middle East, Israel, that area, they lead their sheep, still do today. They lead their sheep. Why is that? First of all, because sheep don't know where they're going. So you drive them, and it's like, then you got to go catch them because they didn't know where they were going in the first place. But the shepherd does the leading. And what that does, it produces a certain amount of trust from the sheep to the shepherd. It creates an intimate relationship between the shepherd and the sheep. Now, we look at that and we're like, how can you have a relationship with that sheep? Well, it's like we do with our dogs. If they were almost pets to these people. And they understood them, and they had such a close relationship, they understood even their voices. So it's easy to drive someone along or something along, but it's much better to lead them. One thing we know about sheep, they're totally dependent on a shepherd. Some have called them, and the sheep are an analogy of us, the followers of Christ, the church, that some have called them dumb. And I'm not for sure if they're dumb or if they just appear that way because they desperately need to be led. They'll literally follow one another over a cliff if left to themselves. They're extremely defenseless. They don't use their teeth to fight. They don't bark. They don't growl. They don't climb trees. They don't run real fast because they're wearing 27 sweaters. They're kind of weighted down. They just need a shepherd. And Jesus understood that in a human sense when the Bible says that he showed great compassion for people that he deemed to be shepherdless. We read it here in Matthew 9:36. It says, seeing the people, he being Jesus, felt compassion for them. Here's why. Because they were distressed and dispirited like sheep without a shepherd. We read on in see again in verse 5, that a stranger, they won't follow. They'll flee from it. Kind of like those sheep in the Australian courtroom that just hunker down in fear when someone else calls their names. And that kind of really speaks to us in a way about people who do decide to leave our faith. They were not really following the voice of the shepherd at all. They were willing to follow a stranger. So look with me in verse 6. All right. All these things that Jesus has just said, this analogy he's just given, it tells us in verse 6, this figure of speech Jesus spoke to them, they didn't get it. They did not understand what those things were which he'd been saying to them. They just didn't get this whole shepherd-sheep analogy. So what does Jesus do? He just kind of dives in a little deeper. He gets more specific in the next 4 verses. But I want you to know the next 4 verses now will shift to the fold in the countryside. It's a different kind of sheepfold, but it's still one that the shepherd would gather and sleep into at night. But it would be more like a makeshift enclosure. Sometimes it might be one that's been out there and they've used it for a while, over and over, different shepherds, or it may be one that he's out there somewhere, he's got to make his own. But that's the only way that he can keep the sheep safe from the predators and also be able to get a nap. He's got to get some sleep because he may be out there today. He's not going to sleep real good like he did in the communal fold when somebody else was watching sheep, but he's still got to get a nap. Give me that picture, guys, if you will. This is just a picture, an example of someone made to kind of tell us what the stone version may look like. And you see how high it is. It's too high for a wolf or a predator to go over. They would stack up stones this way. Of course, if they did the stone version, they probably left it there for the next shepherd that would come by, or maybe they'll come back to it sometime. Sometimes they used limbs. They stacked up lots of limbs and brush, and usually they would place thorns along the top of it, just to try to deter any kind of predator. Sometimes, it serves what area they were in, they were familiar with it, they might use a cave. They might know about a cave in the area, and they would send the sheep into the cave. In any case, it wasn't like the communal fold. It did not, as you can see in the picture, it did not have a gate. It did not have a door. And so there was this opening on one end for the sheep to go in and out of, but there's no physical door. As you can see there, the shepherd would serve as the door. He would lie down across the doorway. The sheep couldn't go out, and the predator couldn't come in without passing over the shepherd's body, waking them up. His attitude is, they'll get to my sheep, but I'm not dead body. And that was his attitude. You can take that down there. Thank you, Lord. And so that was his attitude, and that's what they would do. So now, with that understanding of a countryside sheepfold, let's read verse 7. So Jesus said to him again, truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door. I am the door of the sheep. Here again, this is a truly, truly statement. He's trying to get them. They didn't understand it the first time. He said, listen up. You need to get this. They're still confused, so he says it again. Listen up. You need to get a hold of this. And now he adjusts his analogy a little bit. Now he's saying, instead of talking about a doorkeeper, he's saying, I am the door. This is the first of two I am statements in this section. There will be another one, I am the good shepherd. So these are those 7 I am statements we see throughout John. In other words, he's saying that I am the one who protects the sheep from the predators. Peter reminds us in 1 Peter 5:8 to be of sober spirit, be on the alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. And Jesus is saying, I am the door. I'm the one that protects his sheep, because this roaring lion would have to get past Jesus, because Jesus is willing to die to save his people from the sheep. And of course, we know that he did that on the cross. He died to save his sheep, not from wolves and bears and lions, but from our sins and the penalty of our sins. So without a shepherd, sheep would end up lost or dead or both. And this analogy describes sheep as some pretty fearful creatures. How many of you know sheep won't even drink water if it's running water? They're afraid of moving water. And so we read what David said in that beautiful Psalm 23. In Psalm 23, too, when he said, he leads me beside still water. You ever wonder why he said that? Now, I used to play in the creeks and the home, and I always found still water to be a little, glaze over. I didn't know if I wanted to get in there or not. But in that case, over there, it was the still waters that the sheep would drink because they weren't afraid of it. And he wouldn't take them to running water. And so we learn that in Psalm 23. All right, look with me in verse 8 and 9. And all who came before me are thieves and robbers. And he's speaking of Pharisees here, the ones who came before. But the sheep did not hear them. I am the door, says it again. If anyone enters through me, he will be saved, and will go in and out and find pasture. What Jesus is speaking of here is the safety and the protection of that our shepherd gives us. And we can go in, and we can even go out and find that lush green pasture, whatever it is God has got for us out there. And here's why. This has to do with proximity. Proximity to the shepherd. In other words, it's about us, the sheep, staying close to the shepherd, whether we're in the fold or out on the hillside, so to speak, spiritually speaking. It's about staying close to the shepherd and saying no to the thief. Because the thief will come. And we have to do two things. We not only got to say no to the thief, to the enemy, we know who that is, but we also got to stay close to the shepherd. We can't just put ourselves out there in a vulnerable place. That's what happened with Adam and Eve. Got a little bit too far from God, and the enemy came in. And so we got to do two things. We got to stay close to the shepherd, and we got to say no to the wolves and the enemy and so forth. You want to be a happy sheep? What do you? Okay. Stay close to the shepherd. That's how you do it. You stay close to the shepherd. Let me tell you something. The closer you are, the safer you'll be. I heard a preacher this morning saying, the end of his message, that may God keep you in the palm of his hand. And I thought, that is so beautiful. And it said, that's where I want to be. I want to be in the palm of God's hand, because I'm the same thing. Nothing's going to happen to me. So, all right, verse 10. This is the verse we all know very well. The thief comes only to steal, to kill, and destroy. I come that they may have life and have it abundantly. See the contrast here? Thief comes, steal, kill, destroy. None of those are good. Especially Jesus. None of those are good. The shepherd comes to give life. But he doesn't stop there. He comes to give life abundantly. You ever look that word up? You know, try this. I looked this up in different places. You can look it up in the Greek dictionary. You can look it up in the English dictionary. You'll find pretty much the same thing. And simply this. It's interesting because it has several wonderful synonyms. Things like excessive and extreme. Extravagant. That's what Jesus is saying. I come to give you life extravagant. When he says abundantly. Now I want you to think of it. Do you have abundant life? Right back to where we were, proximity. It comes from staying close to the shepherd. And staying near to the thief. We read about the extravagant life that God wants to give us. It's in the Scripture. We don't have to look for it. Let's look at a few verses. Ephesians 1, 7 and 8. In him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of our trespasses, according, what's this? To the riches of his grace, which he has spilled a little bit on. Sprinkled us with a little bit. It doesn't say that, does it? He has lavished on us. This is talking about extravagant life. Abundant life, Ephesians 2:7, so that in the ages to come he might show the surpassing riches of his grace and kindness toward us in Christ Jesus. You know what's so neat about that? That's talking about after we get to heaven. The ages to come. He's saying, I'm not going to stop there. It's just going to keep getting better and better. I'm going to pour this stuff out on you. The next page. 1 John, God speaks again in his first epistle here. In 3:1, he says, see what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called the children of God, and that is what we are. I would say, that is extravagant living. And that's what Jesus is saying here in this passage. I want to come and give you life that is extravagant. You know, the Bible uses the metaphor of sheep throughout the Scripture, talking about us. And again, sheep are often seen as being not too bright. We'll put it that way, okay? I'm getting an amen back there from somebody knows sheep. Some of you said they're dumb, all right? Now, here's the point. You can be offended by that as a sheep about being compared to sheep, or you can take it as a compliment. That's what David did. That's what David, this was a shepherd boy that grew up with sheep. He understood this whole thing, but he saw the fact that God was his shepherd. He saw it as a compliment. With great gratitude, he would say this. In Psalm 23:1, the Lord is my shepherd. You know what that means? I shall not want. What he is saying, he went on to say in Psalm 23, you read it, you know it. He went on to say that my shepherd does this for me, and my shepherd does that for me. And the whole reason he does all these wonderful things to me is because I have a good shepherd. And so David is actually bragging on his shepherd. He doesn't see being a sheep as something to be offended about at all. He sees it as something to celebrate. And like I said at the beginning, most of us don't know a lot about sheep in our culture, but we do understand pets, don't we? We understand pets. I mean, good night. You look around at all the pet stores, that's a multi-million-dollar industry right there. People love their pets. And how many of you know that there are more than one kind of pet out there? Right? Some can, let's just admit it, some folks just kind of tend to neglect them. They'll sit out there in the hot sun all day or in a freezing dog lot in the wintertime, rarely getting any attention from the owner. And then there are just the opposite type of pet owners. They pet their dogs. You know, they talk to dogs. You know, we don't talk to dogs like we talk to people. We got our own language to dogs all there and stuff. Some of us do. They talk to the dogs. They pet the dogs. They feed them every single day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. They give them fresh, cold water. They take them to the vet when they're sick. And they just make them feel loved. Right? So there's that kind of owner, there's this kind of owner, but then there are those extreme owners. You know, they take their dogs just about everywhere they go. They might dress them up in little sweaters, outfits. You know, on the holidays, they're better dressed than the people that own them. You know, they're all in for all that. Some of them ride in baby carriages, right? Some of them ride in shopping carts. You see them in shopping carts everywhere. The owner's pushing that thing and walking, and the dog is riding, having a good time. Some of them enjoy the comfort of air-conditioned homes, heated homes. Their owners talk to them like their favorite child. Some of them wear T-shirts that say, if I can't bring my dog, I'm not coming. I'll get to you. I've been there, done that, and bought the shirt. Some of us are just a little crazy, I guess. And that may seem extravagant. But I bet you this, if you were to ask the dog, if you showed the dog those 3 opportunities, and you asked the dog, which owner do you want to go home with? I bet you the dog would say, I'll take that extravagant owner. I'll take door number 3. You know what? That's exactly what David was saying throughout Psalm 23. I choose the good shepherd, the extravagant owner, the one who protects me, provides for me, he speaks to me, he listens to me, he loves me. That's what Jesus is saying when he says, I'm going to give you life. I'm going to be the extravagant owner. I'm going to lavish out some love on you. Look at verse 11. It says, I'm the good shepherd. Now it is again. The good shepherd, watch this, lays down his life for the sheep. That's that next time in the story. Notice, this will be the first of 4 times, just in this passage, that Jesus will speak of laying down his life. This is why it was so important. This is why all the truly, truly introductions. Because Jesus is trying to say, what I'm about to tell you is a life change. Okay? This is some really important stuff. So 4 times he talks about laying down his life in just this section of Scripture. Also, I want you to notice the word for. Verse 11. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. I looked that word up. Had a concordance. I was looking and couldn't find the word for it. And then I realized, I remember a long time ago when I bought that thing, they told me that in the front of it Words like for and a and the, they're not in here because they're used too much. So I had to go to the internet to look up to find the Greek word. I couldn't find it in my Greek dictionary, but I finally found the Greek word for the word for. It's huper in Greek. When Jesus says that he will die, give his life for the sheep, the word means on behalf of, or instead of, or for the sake of, or in place of. Jesus says, I will give my life, I'll lay down my life in place of the sheep. In other words, he's saying the sheep were supposed to die. I'm laying down my life in their place. Bringing this back to us where we live in theology, that term that means for that is vicarious atonement. And not a fancy phrase. But what it simply means is substitutionary death. In other words, our sin made it so we were supposed to die. Okay? A hellish death. Or having a hellish eternity. And Jesus says, I'm going to substitute my life for yours. I'm going to stand in for you, in place of, on behalf of you. Where Jesus will be willing to die in place of his feet. 4 times he stresses the point that that's exactly what he did. We know it as the cross. Look at verse 12. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who is not the owner of the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep, he flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. Now, according to those who keep these kind of numbers, yes, there are people who keep these kind of numbers. In the United States, in 1 year, almost 250,000 sheep died due to predatory animals such as cougars, wolves, and coyotes, and so forth. That's a lot of sheep being killed by predators, isn't it? In my neck of the woods, and it is in the woods, but in my neck of the woods, people do this thing in a different way. They use something called the Great Pyrenees. It's a dog. You ever seen them? They use them to protect their sheep. And there are some out there, some mostly goats, chickens, cows, and so forth. Donna recently told me about an article she read where one of these Great Pyrenees dogs was attacked by 11 coyotes at one time. 11. He killed 8 of them and chased the other 3 away. Now, he wasn't even yet fully grown. And he got torn up really bad. By the time they found him, he was in bad shape. But he lived. Now, I don't know if you know anything about these dogs. I was a UPS man. I had to walk up on them sometimes. They're big, they're white, they're beautiful dogs. Mostly friendly toward people. So they are a little intimidated because of their size. But they're also very protective. And so if people are around, I always put a husband because I know what they're bred for. They're bred to protect. They have a 500-pound bite force, which is much higher than a pit bull or a Rottweiler. Think about that. This is why they're able to do what they do. And they are just deadly to a predator of the animals that they're trying to protect. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that a Great Pyrenees is a lot better than a hired hand that Jesus is talking about here, who runs from the wolf when it comes. Because he's not the owner of the sheep. The Great Pyrenees says, just bring it up. Bring your buddies too. I'll take all of you. Because I'm going to protect those sheep. In a way, I don't mean to be rude, but that's almost a picture kind of Lord Jesus Christ. It's like, bring it on. I'm going to protect them no matter what. And he does that. but not the hired hand. Verse 13 says he flees because he's a hired hand. And he is not concerned about sheep, he's concerned about the paycheck. Right? He's just hired by the sheep. Go on to verse 14. Jesus says, but I am the good shepherd, and I know my own, and my own know me. That speaks of our relationship with our shepherd. He knows us, and we know him. How many of you know it's a wonderful thing to know God? How many of you know it's also a wonderful thing to be known by God? Works and all. To be able to say, God, I'm not hiding anything from you. I know you know everything I'm thinking, everything I've done. I'm sorry for all those things. Would you forgive me? And he said, absolutely. Come in for it. And he gives you through that. Because we're known by ourselves. There's something about having that proximity, being with him. Let me show you a few verses right quick. Matthew 20 and 20. Jesus says, lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Hebrews 13:5 says, for he himself says, I will never leave you, nor forsake you. If you say, well, what about the ascension? Once Jesus died, rose again, and spent 40 days on the earth, and then ascended back to heaven, Jesus said, I got that coming too. Here's what he told his disciples in John 14:16. I will ask the Father, he will give you another helper. In the original language, that means one like me, one just like me. That he may be with you forever. How many of you know? Jesus has ascended. We can still talk to him like he's with us, and he is with us, but he's with us through the Holy Spirit of God right here all the time. He will be until we're taken off. John 16:7, a couple of chapters later, and he's still talking about this. Jesus says, I'll tell you the truth, it's to your advantage that I go away. For if I do not go away, the helper will not come to you. But if I go, I'll send him to you. Remember another passage, Jesus says, you'll be able to do better things than I do. And it's because of the Holy Spirit. He's going to be able to take them places and so forth. And then in John 16:13, but when he, the Spirit of truth, that's the Holy Spirit, when he comes, he will guide you into all truth. But he will not speak of his own initiative, but whatever he hears, he will speak, and he will disclose to you what is to come. Speaking of, he used this message for us from God, and he delivers it to us. And we should stay with it. He is still with us. We need to stay close to our shepherd. Verse 15 and 16. Even as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. Jesus wants some kind of relationship with us that he has with his Father. Just as close. And I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep which are not of this fold, and I must bring them also. And they will hear my voice, and they will become one flock with one shepherd. He says, I have other sheep. Right now they're in another fold. You know what that other fold is? We are. It's us. We are. It's the church of Jesus Christ. In the church of Jesus Christ, there are many folds. Right here this morning in Siler City, North Carolina, there is a separate fold on practically every corner. People who are worshiping together, in an enclosure together. They are separate folds. Many folds. But as my title of the message today suggests and says, there is one flock, one shepherd, and many folds. That's the picture of the church today. Though there are many folds, there's still one flock. We are all brothers and sisters in Christ, and we have only one shepherd, Lord Jesus Christ. And why is this important? Because in first century Israel, the Jews believed, this is when Jesus was writing all this, the Jews believed there were two kinds of people on earth. There were the Jews, and then there was everybody else, the Gentiles. And they believed that Jews would go to heaven because they were in the covenant of Abraham. In other words, they believed that they go to heaven by bloodline. We're children of Abraham. We saw argue with Jesus the last message about that. They also believed that Gentiles just went to hell. Matter of fact, the Jewish man would wake up and pray, "Oh God, I thank you that I am not a slave, a Gentile, or a woman." I'm not sure what the women prayed, but that's what they would pray. I read where there was a belief in that day that strongly believed that God created Gentiles to make hell fighters by using them as kings. They actually believed that was the purpose for Gentiles. And this attitude was actually expressed in their temple, as the Gentiles were limited to the court of the Gentiles. They couldn't go any further in. It was the outer court, and they couldn't get any closer. They could come close enough to listen to the rabbis teach, but they couldn't go any further, as there was actually a wall there with a sign on it. That sign has been discovered by archaeologists, and it's in the museum in Israel. Here's how it reads: "Foreigners and Gentiles are not permitted beyond this wall and will be responsible for their own death if they try to pass it." That was their attitude. And that was the attitude, that was the situation that Jesus came to remove. He came to remove the separation by bringing all of those who were far off and making them into one flock with one shepherd. Jew, Gentile, didn't matter. All in the one flock. And how does he do that? How does he tell us 4 times he's going to do that? By laying down his life. See, that's what it's all about. It's not about if you're a Jew, or you're a Gentile, or you're from a certain socioeconomic class, or a certain race, or a certain privilege, or a certain not privilege, or anything else. It's about one thing. Did Jesus lay down his life for you? That's it. That's all that matters. And everybody comes into one flock under that one belief. Here's what we need to know about laying down his life. It was not a disaster like we might think of laying down a life. It was a design. This is a plan from God. It was not a tragedy. It was a strategy. This is how God would take sinners and bring them into relationship with us. By the shepherd laying down his life for them. See, this was a design. The prophets of old, they announced it in advance that Jesus was going to come and he was going to do this. And that he would have the power to lay down his life, but he also had the power to take it up again. And he did that in the resurrection. Read with me 17:18. "For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life, so that I may take it again." Pay attention to that. He's going to say it again. "No one has taken it away from me, but I lay it down on my own initiative, and I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. This commandment I received from my Father." Now, don't overlook this, because I'm going to chase the rabbit here for just a minute, okay? Because this is very important. Don't overlook this, because the cults in our land are banking on this not being true. What Jesus just said. They're banking on that not being true. As their false religions are based on Jesus not being God, which he's told us over and over and over throughout this book that he is. But they're banking on him not being God. But we started, go back with me to chapter 2 right quick. That's when we started the series. Chapter 2, verse 19. Jesus answered them and said this: "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I'll raise it up." And remember, they were confused about that. And so, verse 21, John tells us plainly what he was talking about. He says that he was speaking of the temple of his body. That was where Jesus was saying, "You kill me, and I'll come back. I'll come back from the dead." And he did. recently dealt with a Jehovah's Witness. I wish I had known ahead of time that I would have that opportunity. Because I wasn't quite as prepared as far as knowing word versus words as I could have found them in the short time we had. But I dealt with him and his beliefs. And his beliefs were part of what we discussed that day was simply that Jesus was not able to raise himself. Because that's what he had been taught in his constitution, in his talk. That Jesus, he couldn't be God because he wasn't able to raise himself. How many of you know? How many of you know our modern generation is just filled with positivity? Drive me crazy. I mean, I won't go there. But this modern generation is filled with gullible people who would believe just about anything you tell them without doing any research, any work to find out. They'll just believe it if you say it. How many of you know that America is the most productive nation in the world at producing cults? We produce more cults in this nation than all the other nations of the world. How many of you also know that 8 out of 10 of the top universities in the world are in America? We are the most educated among the educated, yet we are so gullible as a nation that the cults surround here. It's not about being educated, it's about being smart. The cults thrive here because no matter how much education we have, we just believe stuff. And of course, we can talk about the indoctrination in our universities and what people just believe what they're told, because that's kind of where it all started. I won't go there this time. I'm just saying this. Experts say it's because the reason we're so gullible is because we have no word of authority in our lives. Now, we know better than that as Christians, but that's the majority of our nation. I think it's because we have no word of authority, therefore the cults just fail. Here's what I want you to notice. This whole narrative speaks of thieves who are attempting to steal and kill and destroy God's sheep in one way or another. And that's exactly what the cults do. So could you answer the question? If you had the opportunity to talk to a guy called this mixed up and he's trying to mix you up as well, would you be able to answer the question, who did raise Jesus from the dead? The answer might surprise you. Now, whether you take notes or not, from one officer, most of you don't, I think, take this one. Grab your bulletin and write this one down. Write this down because you need to go home and look at this because I'm not going to take time to go. I told you I was going to tell you that. I'm not going to take time, but this is very important. This is so important to our witness. Okay? In a land that's just so gullible that they're being sucked into everything that's wrong. Who raised Jesus from the dead? Well, it says right here in John 10:17, that Jesus did. He said, I have the authority to lay it down and the authority to take it up, and I'll take it up. All right, so there you go, Jesus did. But wait a minute. Write this verse down, Romans 6:4. Go home and look at it later. You'll see there, the Father raised Jesus from the dead. Well, wait a minute. Go to Romans 8:11, and you'll see there that the Holy Spirit raised Jesus from the dead. Wait a minute. Go to Acts 2:32, and you'll see that God raised Jesus from the dead. You know what this is? This is a perfect description of the Trinity, who also the cults don't believe in. If you want to mess them up, give them all that. It says that God is one God in 3 persons. Who raised Jesus from the dead? All 3 persons of the Trinity were involved in the resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ. But you didn't know that before we came in. Now you do. Go home, study, put the note in your phone, and when you run into one, tell them, do this. Do it in love. Don't just saying, tells them that you've been told something wrong. And remember, the experts said it's all because we had no word of authority. Well, there was 4 of them right there. 4 words from the Word of God. 4 authoritative words. Because we have something the rest of the world doesn't have. We have a word of God. There's something called the New World Translation. You ever looked at one? Good, don't. This is the new Bible that the Jehovah's Witnesses have written. It's there. And you know what it does? It leaves out all the passages that speaks of Jesus being God, which is practically all of the book of John. I mean, he does it over and over and over. But that's what they're reading. In other words, they have been given a non-authoritative book that they all believe in that doesn't have the authority of Scripture, and that's why they believe what they believe. Thank God every day, folks, that you've got a real Bible. That you have the truth of God. And that He has protected it through the ages so that you would have it. All right, let's close up. Verse 19. A division occurred again among the Jews because of these words. More division over Jesus. That's what He does. He comes and He says, here's the truth. You can accept it or reject it. This is the dividing line. Verse 20. And many of them were saying, that's a thing. Remember, here we're back to that again. We saw that in the last chapter. Why do you listen to him? Same old ridiculous topics. Verse 21. Watch this. I love this. The others were saying, remember you had the Pharisees and other people there listening to this. They said, wait a minute. These are not the sons of one demon-possessed. A demon cannot open the eyes of the blind. Remember, this is a continuation of what we just saw. Jesus opening the blind eyes. So it relates back to that. Here's what we see as I close. I've told you this before, but Jesus always came with a blessing, something He did for someone, the healing of people, the feeding of people, the exercising demons out of people, whatever. You can almost always follow that up with some kind of sermon, some kind of message. You know what this is? Look at this verse again, verse 21. These are not the sayings. In other words, these are not the words of one spoken who is demon-possessed. A demon can't open the eyes of the blind, can it? So what they're saying is because we saw that blind man's eyes open, nobody had ever done that before. You know what? I kind of believe what the guy's saying. There's your authority. When one comes and he gives sight to the blind, I'm going to listen to what he says. There's no way he's demon-possessed. That's what they say. That's really starting to get too big. Here's the reason I brought that point out. When we go and do wonderful things for people, when we take them food, visit them when they're sick, they're wheelchair wrapped, take them yard care and all that, always follow that up with a testimony, with words. The words are saying, basically, you don't have to say it this way, but make them know, I'm here doing these things for you because I love you, because God loves me, and He loves you. But let them know, follow up the good things with good words. Because that's how we reach people. We can do a lot of wonderful things with people, and still there is. The words of the gospel that save us. It's the things we do that opens the opportunity to say the words of the gospel. See what I'm saying? Please say it, dude. I'm tired of talking to get tired of this. All right? So, I'll end by saying this. Who's your shepherd? Who's your shepherd? He comes and says there's 2 kinds of guys claiming to be shepherds. There's this thief, this robber, they come in by another way. They just want to steal, kill, and destroy. But I'm the good shepherd. And I want to give you life, and I want to give you life abundantly. Who do you choose? don't know how to do that here, and you want to listen to that, it's simply by knowing this. Jesus came from heaven to earth. He left the most extravagant of all to come to earth to take on the flesh of man, live through this dirty, filthy world without ever sinning, went to a cross in our place. Remember the word for? In our place. Died for us. And we would receive that gift, believe in Him, give our lives to Him, surrender to Him as Lord and Savior, that He will do what He said He would do. Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, thank you. Thank you that you are the extravagant shepherd. You are the one that loves us so much that you didn't just save us, which would have been super. I mean, it would have just been the most wonderful thing. But now you are keeping us in abundant life. Lord, give us the wisdom to see that and say, I don't need that. And I don't want it to be. I want to share the opportunity for everybody else. They can meet you. They can see you. Help us to have missionary minds, Lord, because we have been given so much. Help us to be willing to at least give the opportunity for actions that follow by the words to the financial lives. In Jesus' name I pray. If you'd like to come and do business with God this morning, whatever way, maybe just want to say, I'm not going in proximity with you lately, Lord. I've kind of gotten away. I want you to draw me back. I want you to put me back in. You can see something. I was going to relax it. I want to go slow and close. I want to come and still down. Been a little away. I want to come back. Whatever you want to deal with, the altar is open. Would you come?
It's good to be in the house of the Lord this morning, right? Amen. All right.
We have got these homecoming banners now. Flyers. Good places in town. Snow. Let's hang up on it. We run out to make those the days. The men will be here somewhere now. And just the whole thing. That's the way we like people to come and spend that special day. So make sure to pick up one of those. I'm hoping that you will all have a great day. You might even have a party out there. I looked at what these food is. But so just hope you have a great day. Remember, our midweek show. Come back next week and then Sunday night. Come back to Sunday. Sometime with as well. That's all I got to say. I've talked enough. Y'all talk to each other. All right.